We also know if you exercise on that low grade vibration that you get more bang for your buck. So if you're doing a push-up, things like that, that you can actually develop muscle a little bit faster by doing that. Longo and Anderson said, diet should be whole grains and vegetables, some fish, no red meat, no processed meat, very low white meat, low sugar, good levels of nuts, olive oil, and some dark chocolate. So I much prefer the growth hormone secretagogue.
Welcome to our Q&A highlights. Q&A sessions are recorded every month, and our enhanced members get an exclusive opportunity to ask questions from one of cellular medicine's brightest minds, Dr. Elizabeth Yurth. Get a chance to ask your questions by becoming our enhanced member at bli.academy/memberships. You also get access to our content library full of tips, articles, videos, lectures, previous live Q&A sessions, and more.
So Sandy asks about vibration plates, or what we call power. One of the brands is called power plates. So vibration plates, if those of you don't know, you can exercise on them, but they basically give a low grade vibration. And in so doing, we know that low grade vibration helps bone. So it's good for osteoporosis. We also know if you exercise on that low grade vibration that you get more bang for your buck. So if you're doing a push-up, things like that, that you can actually develop muscle a little bit faster by doing that. So Mayo Clinic did a big review a while ago looking at vibration plates, and they did find that they enhanced blood flow, they reduced muscle soreness, people could exercise longer and get less sore, they helped fat burning, they improved flexibility, they actually even lowered cortisol levels. People who can't use them if you're pregnant, if you have blood clots, you certainly wouldn't want to use them. There's actually an interesting study, 2018, I think, that actually they used it in chemotherapy patients who used it and were very deconditioned, and they found it really helped them just with improvements in function and balance just by standing on the vibration plate when they couldn't do other exercise, helped them to maintain muscle mass. And there's some good studies on it in bone mineral density as well, and even study interestingly on Crohn's disease. Not exactly sure how it does that, but maybe it's having that kind of low grade vibration has some kind of stimulation for immune function. So I think there's some good science behind these. I think there's different brands. I think there's like VibraFit and Merodyne. Power Plate probably is the one that seems to have the most reputation behind it. I do have patients, and this is where I caution you because these are expensive. You might want to try it before you buy one and there are some gyms that have them, things like that, because honestly, I have a few patients that for whatever reason, it really aggravated their back, and it should be helpful, but we do know that like truck drivers with that low grade vibration, that they are more prone to back pain. So, is there some piece there? So I do have some patients who have degenerative disc disease that did aggravate their back. So I would caution to try it first before you go spend the money on it. But I do think they have some interesting scientific data behind particularly osteoporosis, but probably behind building muscle in maybe a more simplistic fashion as well. Marla asks if there's any long-term benefits or good reasons to consider taking somebody off of growth hormone and putting them instead on growth hormone stimulating peptides, if money's not a concern. She also says, I enjoy learning so much from the content you're producing here. Thank you very much. Oh, thank you for saying that. I really appreciate that. So here is my answer to that. So we used to use human growth hormone a lot. And one of the difficult things about human growth hormone is that you're giving an exogenous sort of surge. So you give an injection of growth hormone. It gets this exogenous surge of growth hormone. And that's not the way our body does growth hormone. And so it's not physiologic. Anything that's not physiologic has more downsides. So you're supersaturating receptors, not a great thing. And you're actually changing some of the pituitary function. There's many, many more side effects when you do that. So you'll start to see a lot more, people will start to get sort of this kind of weird sort of, like if you think about the old bodybuilders, we had this kind of protruding abdomens. That was sort of this growth hormone effect. A lot of times you'll see more edema in people. But even if you get that all balanced, it's just not the best thing to put in big surges. So what growth hormone secretagogues do, so we usually use a combination, what's called a growth hormone releasing hormone, such as CJC or tesamorelin, and a growth hormone releasing peptide, such as ipamorelin. And those two together basically tell your pituitary to make and physiologically release a little bit more growth hormone. So we're actually working with your body the way it works, as opposed to just giving this big exogenous load. So I like things to be physiologic. So I much prefer the growth hormone secretagogues. I think they're safer. I think they work just as well if they're dosed appropriately. And I do have patients who love their growth hormone. And so be it. If they love their growth hormone and it's working for them, I'm who am I to tell them to change, right? But that's my opinion. You want to be physiologic. That's the best way to do these things. Okay, Elaine asks about TA1 for T cell dysregulation. And is there anything else you'd recommend? So yes, we need to have normal T cell function. So T cell immunity. We have all different types of T cells, really important. So we have to have balanced T cells, T lymphocytes, and we have two types of sort of balance of our immune system. And TA1 is great for that. There's also pentacin, which we talked about for joints. Pentacin has a lot of other benefits. One is antiviral. Two is it inhibits mast cell activation. Three is it regulates Th2 immunity. So I love pentacin for my patients who have immune dysfunction. And then spermidine. Spermidine has some great studies. So helps vaccines work better, improves T lymphocytes. So spermidine is another go-to. So TA1 a little harder to get. Pentacin and spermidine maybe a little bit easier to get. Next is Louis has a question about NAD and getting more and more into longevity. And this keeps coming up on my Instagram feeds. Yep. Is the nasal spray an effective way to get it, or should I find an IV clinical pharmacy to get it from? And do you have any NAD plugs that you can recommend? Well, I hate to say this, and I'm going to be sometimes maybe in the minority on this. I wouldn't waste my money on either the NAD nasal spray or the NAD IVs at this point. If you look at NAD, it's super important. We know that it is a vital coenzyme. It functions primarily in our mitochondria. We know it declines as we age. We know it's really, really important for energy. We know it's important for longevity. We know that low NAD is linked to mitochondrial inefficiency. So it's important. But can you give IV NAD and do anything? And there's natural ways of increasing NAD. Exercise increases NAD. Fasting increases NAD. But NAD IV therapy, certainly a lot easier than exercise, right? The problem is that NAD is kind of a big molecule. And if we need the NAD to get into the cell where the mitochondria are, it doesn't. It is too big of a molecule. So when you go and spend your $600 for your NAD IV infusion, are you really getting it to the mitochondria? Probably not. At least right now, there is no evidence that we can give NAD either IV or as a nasal spray and get into the cells. So either oral, IV, nasal, it's this big phosphorylated molecule. It just can't get intracellular. And nor do we even know how it gets transported across the cell membrane. There's a transporter, I think, called connexin 43 that some people are looking at that maybe you can utilize to get the NAD there. Right now, it has to be broken down into its precursors first to get into the cell, right? So why not take the precursors? Because they're a lot cheaper and easier to take than going and finding your NAD IV. But when you read the anecdotal, everybody says, I got my NAD IV and I felt great. What is that? Is it placebo? Is it because lots of times they mix the NAD with other things? I don't know. Maybe it has an effect and we just don't have the scientific data to support it yet. But right now, we do not have scientific data. There's a study I'll link to you guys that looked at every. Patrice also asks about protein. So this is a really, it's a great question. And it's a really controversial question. So so she asked where I stand on the protein controversy. And for those who don't know, the protein controversy is protein is not pro-longevity. In fact, a pro-longevity diet is a low protein diet, a low branched chain amino diet. And that is considered much more longevity inducing than a high protein diet. In fact, a study just came out with Walter Longo out of USC and Dr. Anderson out of University of Wisconsin-Madison. They did a really big overview looking at diets and what the optimal longevity diet is. And what they came up with after looking at studying all these clinical studies and epidemiologic studies, it was a huge undertaking. They looked at in primates and humans, including humans who were 100 and older. And they found that the optimal longevity diet is a moderate to high intake of non-refined carbohydrates,